Okay. Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm just going to give a short enough introduction to this project. It's the EIP project funded by the European Union Department of Agriculture, Biomass to Biochar. And our focus in our project is similar to what was said in the previous one. It's sort of, there's a bit of overlap there, but to look at currently unutilized biomass streams, primarily rushes. We also looked at bracken, furze, and hazel. But I live here in West Clare, or sorry, East Clare, and all along the western seaboard, the very common is see rushes or juncus, as it's the Latin name, on wet, heavy ground. So there's currently no real use for that. And as you can see from the above pictures, this is what happens to some of this material. People farmers go to a lot of, spend a lot of resources on collecting them and then just wanting to dump them. So part of the project was to build a pilot mobile pyrolysis plant, and that's what's underneath. So I'm just going to go back a little bit in time to explain why this might come about. Excuse me. Basically, I grew up in a farm in the Midlands, and every year we had tillage also, like the previous speaker there, and we had barley, small amount, 20 acres. In addition to that, we grew 1 acre of oats every year. The barley was covered with combine, and then every year the reaping fighter would come in right up until the time my father died a few years ago. This was almost an annual event in our farm where the oats was cut with a reaping binder, and then you ran to the thrashing machine there in the middle, and that straw was then used to roof this house, which was his home place, and we lived in the house behind it. So we did circularity going on from an area 8 in our farm. And in addition to that, we had our own firewood in our farm. We cut a small amount of turf, but mainly we got most of it. So sometimes I just thought I'd address this because, you know, a lot of what we're doing is just repeating history, to just reimagining it. But leading on from the thrashing machine, that was the inspiration then for this machine that we got built for this project. So I just very quick through it, but I have a video in a minute which will explain a bit more about this. But that's the bale chopper, and you got the conveyor belt. And then you got the hopper, where the straw goes into that hopper through this pyroid tube, which is about either about 350 to 500 degrees Celsius, and the biochar comes out here into a barrel. This here at the front is the combustion chamber, which burns off the emissions. So when it's up and running properly, up to temperature, there's no visible smoke coming from the machine. In addition to that, the gases are recirculated around, and it's self-sustaining, but it has to be started with propane gas, just to get it going, get the temperatures up. So I'll just play this video and I'll talk through it because I think it might just explain it. Maybe you can't hear me now. Anyway, got the bale chopper, chopping the rushes, and you can see it's going up. A bit dusty now, I'll come around the side here. Material goes up into the hopper. We're just looking in briefly there into that's the combustion chamber where the gas goes through. That's where the heat is generated. And the gases then are transferred over there. This is the auger which removes the biochar from the pyroid tube. And you can see it there going in. That's rushes. Come around here. So now this is where you could say the action happens. This is the pyroid tube where all the heat generated. And it heats, it's at around 500. The control panel. Display unit, just so you can see inside the hopper, and that's the control panel there, given the various temperatures and so on. The generators there to the left. So that's that. Just to give it. But what is biochar? What biochar, as I sort of alluded to there, is basically it's charcoal-like substance which is produced in a low oxygen or no oxygen environment at 300, 600 degrees, and it can literally be made from a biscuit tin up to machines and cost millions of euros, everything in between. It's an old technology. It's been around for a long time. There's the famous Terra Precious size. We own it. We had our own version here in Ireland once upon a time too. Peering and burning was called, which we'll go into. But so it was also used in Ireland without people realizing it, that technique. Now, the science would then, as I say there, we got 322,000 hits on biochar, Google Scholar, versus 76. So there's a huge amount of research, and it all sort of revolves around sort of that picture below, the structure of it. It's high surface area, and that's actually a cross section of rushes. Again, you could go on all night about that, and it depends on who the people are. Some people know an awful lot, but I'm not just going to focus. I have to go to cover the whole the project and what we've done. This is a poster we got, and you can see it sort of in the background behind me. Just gives an overview of the project, which has been very useful when I'm out on demo days exploring, because it said you get one person who knows an awful lot about biochar and others don't know, and we just covered the various aspects. But rather than going into the details here, I'm going to be touching on some of these in the next slides, 2 slides. So why, as I said, we use it was to develop a sort of cascade benefit of the biochar by sustainable management of the landscapes. So we looked at 4 biomass streams, primarily focused on Juncus, which is the first one rounded up, bracken, furze, and hazel at the bottom. We focus on just on the Juncus, the rushes. One of the key things here where I live is there's SPA, hen harrier SPA, and there's management of the landscape, and you can't just call all the rushes because they're part of the habitat, but they need to be managed. And there's the satellite image of a field not far from me where the fields were cut in strips, and only that material would be left to rot, and the carbon would be released into the atmosphere and no benefit to the farmer. So it was to tap into that. How could you use rushes? The only current real use of rushes here is for bedding. Some people like them for bedding, and others won't go near them. They'd rather buy bales of straw. But once you have it made, then what can you do with it? So you can add it then directly to silage, or to the feed, or to the bedding, or to the slurry, and then it goes back into the soil. And each one of them, if you add it to the silage at the beginning, you get this cascade benefit. You're getting the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, either methane or ammonia is another common one. And some would say, well, how do you even know that? It's funny, that's just hearsay. So we conducted this trial. These are IBC tanks, 4 IBCs, not done scientifically, this particular experiment, but the volumes in these are 700 litres of slurry. And that was carried out over, I don't know, was it 90 days? Was it 90 days? 90 days. And we, interestingly enough, we actually got, with Ulex, which is furze, we got an increase in gas emissions, but with Juncus, we got a dramatic reduction in slurry gas emissions by 60%. We followed that up with Salignus Laboratory, just focused on the biochar made from rushes, because that's what the project was mostly about. And we got a reduction of 33% in that slurry gas, and using their equipment. And we're currently running this particular experiment is going at the moment. And initial indications are that we're also getting a reduction in methane emissions from artificial ruminants using this technique. Now, I'm not a scientist, this is a master's student doing this, is a small mini project, and it's hoped that if there's good results to this, it might be brought on further by PhD students and so on. So this is initial. We weren't, going into high-end research. We're just trying to prove the concept for a lot of these things, and with the hope that somebody else will pick up on them then. Of course, then some people then say, because if you're in better land on the East Coast, you're probably saying, well, what are rushes? Where are rushes? But when you're down here, there's no doubt about it that there's plenty of rushes. So we carried out a survey, and we got 125 respondents. And as you can see there, 64% of them are actively managing their rushes, cutting them, spraying them, topping them. So that's a cost to all these farmers. So they're already putting money into them and they're getting nothing for them. And then a certain amount, 24% there, harvesting and baling them. And only half of them are storing them. So the point here is that there's plenty of potential for this material. If we go over to the right-hand slide, then it was just analyze that data a bit more in terms of what to make going. If you take the 1 to 5 hectare person, there, there's 35 bales there roughly today have. That's 1.7, potentially 1.75 tons of biochar. So that's biochar, that's heat that could be generated from that could be captured. In addition to biochar, which could benefit both the animals and slurry and so on, and it could be sold as carbon credits. The figure there, the fuel there, that was derived from that link below from Juncus. They use straw. So if anybody wants to check that out and look up that paper, and they can find out more about it. Also, then the other uses for water, with some trials in this, but mainly water, it's decontamination to absorb pesticides and fertilizer runoff. A whole range of, if you go to a place like Germany, they're using it it was in a plant, sewage treatment plant, and they were going to put in something like a half-acre plant with biochar in it, to take up the pharmaceuticals coming out of this treatment plant, because the water looked crystal clear, but it's one of the pharmaceutical products which are causing a problem. So that's another potential use on farms, and I imagine there will be, talking to other people, there will be more projects coming up like that. And going back probably to the earlier slide, we in the course of doing this, it sort of ended up, there's more of an accident developing other products. We go to that main picture there. So you got the rushes dry, and then you have them chopped, which rushes are not easy to chop. The video there, the machine was a big Fendt tractor, 250 horsepower, and it was really growing under it, the hammer milling. I should say, sorry, that's the next one, the hammer mill. Chop isn't too bad, but hammer milling. We got briquettes made, and we got pellets made from them. And then the far end is torrefied material, which was brought up to Erigna, and they made some pellets, torrefied material, which would be used as a coal substitute. The other thing down, we just dropped down below, I have a small nursery myself, and I've done a trial just using 100% Juncus as a potting media, and it worked okay, but I need to do more work on that. The carbon blocks at the different shows proved very successful, that people are very interested in this. Initially, I just done it as a sort of a PR type thing that people would be interested. And it turns out that there is more people looking at this. And I heard something like, I don't know, 10–20% of carbon biochar added to a block could offset emissions from making the block. But that's, as I said, for engineers, structural engineers and so on to look into. We carried out this small trial here with coated urea. And we've now sent, there's young scientists currently doing a study in that, hoping to present their results in January, which hopefully if it comes to somebody else might pick up on it. And as a result of the project, we also were able to contribute to the Expert Evidence Climate Action Plan, which had no mention of biochar, pyrolysis, gasification, and our CDR. It has CCS, which is carbon capture and storage, but we need CDR, which is planting trees and locking up carbon in soils, and part of CDR, which is carbon dioxide removal. Biochar is very much part of that, but none of that was mentioned in that. So I'm hoping when the next edition that comes out, to have introduced it. The opportunities for it, probably more so now than ever, is the constant awareness of chemicals, and particularly herbicides in water, and MCPA one that often crops up. MCPA is used to control rushes. It doesn't kill the grass, it kills the rushes, so it's widely used. Then the awareness, as we all know, the war, you know, that we'd sort of we thought we could outsource everything, and now we could use this material, biomass from rushes, to create our own energy. Biochar is now recognised as a fertiliser as of this year. That's only, didn't get much publicity, but it often takes a while for these things to creep into the general population, agricultural people. Land rewetting. 300,000 hectares being talked about in re-wet, so that's going to probably provide more opportunities. It's going to be more of this type of land, and it's going to be managed, because we live in a managed, it's very little of our landscape is natural anymore. It's managed in some form or another. Ban of green waste burning. This looks like it's coming about. The Greens have said that there wasn't going to be a derogation this coming January, but I don't know. But even still, it's going to come about one way or another. What are we going to do with all this green waste material? And as mentioned earlier, the EU, European Union, you know, is looking for sinks for carbon dioxide, and biochar could be very much part of this. And, you know, coming towards the end here, can we have some sort of, we obviously missed the acre scheme, but into the future where you could actually, farmers could get paid for harvesting these bales, sort of bonus money, and then turn this rushes into biochar. Then in Ireland, the future, where could we go? A bit of repetition here, but the water treatment said pharmaceuticals. I can see that becoming more and more as we solve one problem. We've got these plants that are tertiary, some of them are only secondary, which is a major problem. But once they get into this, and there's so much pharmaceuticals, they probably need to have carbon to remove them. The fertilizer, carbon dioxide removal, which I was mentioned, the permanent storage. There's a company called Charm, the USA, that's actually turned to bio-oil. And if anybody wants to know, that's what bio-oil is. It's like thick, gloopy material, comes out, can be used, but because there's not enough of it, there's not enough processing of it. But they're burying it as constant. And we could generate, if you could capture the heat, you can actually, there's companies out there now, that's what some of these images are. One top on Scottish one, the other one I think is up in Northern Europe, Sweden or somewhere like that, filled with sand, storing heat. And this is, I think, Italy or somewhere like that. Basically, these are mobile plants. You can capture the heat and bring it somewhere else. So farmers could actually farm in heat. So that's the lot. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bernard. So just a couple of questions for me. Like, you're testing so many different things there. The first one, just on the RUSI tech and the animal emissions, do you have an estimate on what that's shown in terms of methane reduction?
No, unfortunately, I don't. I was hoping I would have tonight. I was very much so hoping it, but not yet. No, I'm not. The only thing I was told by the student that was doing it that it was positive, but they were looking at it because that's all I know at this moment. So maybe next week I might hear more.
So, the different things that you're trialing there. So, for example, water filtration, feed additives, then soil amendment. Do you see a different value associated with some of those products if they were to go to the market?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously the lowest contaminant, adding it to anything with soil generally is going to get is, if you're adding it to feed, you're high value. But also, as you also would be aware, things have happened the last few decades, high risk too. So you have to everything properly. Yeah, soil's obviously a lot more tolerant, so you'd have to have a lot more control of your environment if you're adding that to animal feed, But that would be the higher end. The other end then is even more higher end, like there's even talk about the use for batteries, cathodes and batteries. So, you can go everything from the gardener, the hobby gardener, right up to high end uses that I wouldn't even understand.
Yeah. The other one I was thinking, you showed in your own presentation, but then in the slides and at the end you showed some other examples of mobile units, mobile pyrolysis units.
No, they weren't actually. They were actually storing.
Okay.
They were actually storing.
Oh, okay.
They were capturing heat and storing them to transfer to other places.
Oh, okay. But I'm just wondering, how do you see, what scale do you see this viable at? Do you see, is your unit a pilot unit? Does it need to scale to a bigger scale to be commercially viable?
Yeah, absolutely. The machine I have is only pilot and more or less prove the concept. We would have a lot of issues trying to get rushes just to move to an auger, even more so than you would have straw. They're very fibrous, they don't break up easily. But yeah, it could be either a bigger mobile plant or maybe I would be very in favor of the community type places, not this idea of bringing material from the far end of the world into our biomass. I'm very much in favor of my ideas with community-based projects. So you would bring maybe the material within, let's say, a 10-mile catchment of a facility and have that model and a co-op model again, that's what I would like to see, because there are, one of the things is in Ireland, particularly probably unique to Ireland, and this well, not unique to Ireland, but is damp humidity. You totally underestimate till you start trying something like this. Moisture is like really and everything right down to this time last year. I had first trouble with some motors. I couldn't understand what was wrong with tripping out switches. They just got damp. The water literally got into them. So you probably moved into more centralized location. So you'd have to be drying the material, trying to store material, and these all become problems. Particularly in winter. In summer you can get away with it, but in winter not so much.
Thanks, Bernard. So we might get a few more questions at the end, and thanks for your presentation.